here we go. We are very honored to have, I want to thank the panel again. That was a terrific discussion and a perfect prelude to our next speaker. The EAC is honored to be joined by Senator Roy Blunt from the state of Missouri, who was generous enough to sponsor this space. Building on his background as a public servant, university president, teacher, and United States Senator, Roy Blunt was elected to the United States Senate in 2010. Senator Blunt serves as chairman of the Senate Rules Committee, and Administration Committee, and vice chairman of the Senate Republican Conference. He also serves on Senate Appropriations, Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation, Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. In addition, Senator Blunt serves as chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Labor, Health and Human Services, Education, and Related Agencies, and the Commerce Subcommittee on Aviation Operations, Safety, and Security. The people of Southwest Missouri overwhelmingly elected Senator Blunt 7 times to the United States House of Representatives. Senator Blunt was elected Majority Whip earlier in his career than any member of Congress in over 8 decades. He was elected to Senate leadership during his first year in the Senate. During Vice Chair McCormick. Please. I hate these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all. Glad to be here. I should have stopped earlier, but I was enjoying it there for a while, and I thought we've just gone a little bit too far. I'm glad you're here. I appreciate what you do. I respect what you do. As we just mentioned, I serve on the Intel Committee. Obviously, it's been a big issue for us the last year and a half. I serve on the Rules Committee, which is the election verification committee, among other things, for the Senate. And beyond that, for the first 8 years, the first 12 years I was a public official. I was the local election authority in the biggest county where an elected person did that job, as opposed to a commissioner, a board of election commissioners in our state. The 8 years after that, I was the Secretary of State, the chief election official. For my Secretary of State friends who are here, I'm still a dues-paying member of NAS, and it was one of the best organizations I was ever part of, both for myself and my family, and we enjoyed it greatly. But speaking to an event a couple of weeks ago in St. Louis that Secretary Ashcroft hosted, there were 8 or 9 secretaries of state there and a number of Missouri officials, but even more officials from around the country. It occurred to me as I was giving that speech that of all the public responsibilities I've had, that I don't think I took any more seriously or felt more my reputation, my responsibility on the line than when I was either the chief state election official or a local election authority. They know exactly where to come if something goes wrong on Election Day. And if Murphy's Law ever applied, it applies on Election Day. But I think that's one of the reasons I'm so committed, as I believe my colleagues are, to continuing to have the fundamental responsibility for election administration to be at the state and local level. I think the federal government can do some things to help. And I also believe that in this year's election, everything that Senator Klobuchar and I would like to see happen by statute is basically happening. Now, from my point of view, I still would like to see that memorialized in law so that 5 years from now or 6 years from now or 10 years from now, it still continues to happen, that the federal opportunities and agencies and backup that's available to you is available in a way that we all are clearly understanding and comfortable with. We are not going to get anything in law between now and Election Day, which probably makes it even more important that we immediately look back at this election and say, okay, what happened that should have happened? What happened that shouldn't have happened? What kind of deference was given to people who've been elected to do these jobs? What kind of security and clearance and immediate access to information was given to people who do these jobs? And I can guarantee you that I'll be very committed to doing that. I think our committee will be committed to do that. And so we're going to continue to work in that direction. The FBI director, about 3 weeks ago now, Christopher Wray said that people should have great assurance that everything is being done to secure the election system itself, and I think that's accurate. I think we're all at a heightened level of awareness, hopefully at a heightened level of information sharing, and we're going to continue to watch carefully and closely and communicate both with the Election Assistance Commission and Homeland Security to see that those things are happening. We don't want a situation again where a few weeks before the election, suddenly local state officials are told, well, we've decided we're going to declare this a critical infrastructure. That's happened now. We've had 18 months or so to think about it, to understand exactly what that means. The thing you want least if you're responsible for election administration is a big surprise at the last minute. Auditing, clearly, many states are doing everything that I would hope we'd see in auditing. That was a big concern to many of the state election officials that contacted us when we thought we had a bill that everybody agreed on. The auditing and how that would happen became a problem. I personally think that there should be a paper trail, something that can be counted after the election. I also believe that that's where everybody is headed, whether they're there right now or not. And I think the greatest assurance you can give voters about what happened on Election Day is not only do we go back and spot check and verify that what we announced happened is what happened, but we would have the capacity in any election at any time to go back and actually have something that voters held in their hand, looked at, saw what they were trying to do, and that's been saved, just like paper ballots before voting machines were saved. So we want to work with you on this. The central thread of the fabric of democracy is people having confidence that what they were told happened on Election Day is what absolutely happened. Sometimes it's hard enough to accept the results of an election, even if you fully are convinced that that's really what voters wanted to do. It's certainly hard to accept the results of an election if somehow you think that there's any question about that. So as we do more verification, as we have try to create more certainty and assurance in this process, we're going to be working with you to do that. Senator Klobuchar and I are both committed to that. I'm glad to get a chance to work with her on the Rules Committee that we work on together, and look forward to both of us continuing to work with you. So thanks for letting me come by for a few moments today.
Thank you again, Senator Blunt, and I attended that event in Missouri and was very pleased with Secretary Ashcroft in putting that on. It was really helpful, and I think that those who were in attendance really learned a lot. Once again, I want to express my deep appreciation to both the senators here today and introduce our next speaker, Senator Amy Klobuchar, who serves as chair of the Senate Democratic Steering Committee and ranking member on the Senate Rules and Administration Committee. Since arriving in the Senate in 2006, Senator Klobuchar has worked with Democrats and Republicans to get things done, including landmark legislation to end human trafficking and the opioid epidemic. She's fought to protect consumer protection and more than a generation, and has pushed the cell phone industry to enact more consumer-friendly policies. And with that, I want to introduce Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Thanks for your work. Thank you. It's great to be here with Senator Blunt. There's a few things going on in the building this week, but we're focused right now on some work that we've been doing together for quite a while. And in fact, Roy and I co-chair the Adoption Caucus and the Tourism Caucus. And then my favorite thing we did this year as leading the Rules Committee, is that we got Tammy Duckworth came to us when she was having her second baby at age 50. As you know, she's in a wheelchair with no legs because of her service in Iraq. And she actually asked if she could bring the baby on the floor. So Roy and I had to work through a rule that had not been changed in hundreds of years except to allow a dog on the floor in the 80s. And we're able to get this through a lot of senior members. My favorite comment was one of the senators said to the press, well, maybe we could have this baby on the floor, but what if we have 10 babies on the floor? And I said, we already have 10 babies on the floor. So anyway, there was this amazing moment where Tammy wheeled herself on the floor with this little 10-week-old 6-pound baby named Miley Pearl. And the baby slept through the entire historic moment. So it was just a lot of good work we do together, and this is part of it. I want to thank as well, in addition to the chairman, Vice Chairman Christy McCormick and the Election Assistance Commission staff. Thank you. Secretary Jim Condos, the president of the National Association of Secretaries of States. We've had some interesting discussions recently about the Secure Elections Act, and he's standing up for all of the Secretary of States across the country. We really hope we can work this out. And I want to thank you for all the work you're doing on the front line. I had a job similar to this. I was the county attorney in our biggest county, and I knew what it was like to have these mandates come from the state or the federal government. And then oftentimes they would send something down and there'd be no money and we'd be stuck being the ones having to do it. And so we don't want that to happen here. And I think that is why we actually started out this year, as you know, with that $380 million that Senator Langford and I and others on the Appropriations Committee and Senator Blunt all supported. And I know most of that money has gone out to the states and it's in various stages, but we thought that was very important to do. At the same point, because we are really dealing with a international threat, and it's not easy for a state, whether it be Arkansas or Maine or North Dakota, to deal with that by themselves. And that's why we're also looking at some of our rules and laws and how we can make sure, using the expertise from Homeland Security and that we have here, that we use that expertise and make sure that if we're going to give money in the future, we at least have some, I would say, I want to say it in the nicest way, have a carrot, and not a stick, tied to that funding, which is why we would like to get this bill passed. And that would include, as Roy mentioned, the backup paper ballots, and we're looking at doing possibly pilots with audits, and then, of course, making sure that Homeland Security is giving the information. Okay, that was Homeland Security, I know, was giving the information. Lindsay Kerr, our chief counsel, thank you. But giving the information as soon as possible to the states, because as you know, that was such a problem when 21 states we later found out were hacked, including my own, the state of Minnesota, and didn't know that, or there were attempts to hack, including what we found in the indictment out of the Justice Department of the GRU members, the Russian intelligence people who had violated our laws, and one of them, it doesn't say which state, we have a suspicion, but actually accessed data of 500,000 voters. So those are real things happening right now. And I kind of have an adverse reaction when people call it meddling in our election. That is what I do when I call my daughter on a Saturday night and ask her what she's doing, okay? That's what that is. But to me, this is much more of an organized cyber attack. And while the focus has been on Russia because of 2016, it could easily be another country or another criminal organization, and we have to take this seriously. And that's why I think part of this is stepping back a little and thinking how we always do things, well, we always did things this way. We're going to have to do things differently. I love that we have a decentralized election system. I think that's one of our protections, that we don't have everything the same in every single state. But at the same time, what Senator Langford and I did with that bill was saying, okay, what are some things we can do working in that structure to make sure everyone gets the message that we want to give you more money, states, to help you. But we want to also make sure that we take those best practices that we know are working, which is these backup paper ballots, or we know will protect us if there's a hack. Because part of this, while it is an individual state interest, it's going to affect the whole nation if one county in one state or if one state gets hacked into. So that's the perspective we have in addition to the work that we're doing with the states. We are now 31 days away from the next election. Who's counting? And you look at what we have learned from past elections. 2000 election showed us the shortcomings of the butterfly ballot. Thought I'd bring that up. And 2016, of course, we learned some of our own shortcomings with what we saw. Another thing I wanted to bring up, which isn't really in the election hardware software space, but it's just more about the propaganda issue, which doesn't exactly affect firsthand election officials in your day-to-day work or what's going to happen on election day. But another concern that we have, and that the security people had under both President Obama and President Trump, is just what we're seeing on social media. And I just put that, since you guys are experts in elections, something that I know you hear about and should think about. Senator McCain, and we miss him every day here, and I and Senator Warner had a bill, and it's still in there. We're trying to get a Republican as the lead to take Senator McCain's place on the bill. But what it does is it says that the major platforms should have to put up ads for disclosure and disclaimer, so you're able to see who's paying for them, and then you're able to see what they are, both for issue ads and for candidate ads. And it really exactly mimics what we do for TV, radio, and newspaper. Because, as you know, $1.4 billion was spent, $1.4 billion on internet ads on all sides for the political campaigns in 2016, and the forecast for 2020 is like $3 to $4 billion. Now, fortunately, because there was a little hearing about something called Cambridge Analytica, and Mark Zuckerberg, if you saw, had to testify. Facebook has said they support the bill, and Twitter supports the bill, and they are now doing it themselves, which is great, but we want to have the same rules apply across the board, and that's why we're trying to pass the bill. And I hope when we get out of the election time period, we will be able to get this done. So what I would like to see as we move forward is, first of all, more information sharing, and we know that Homeland Security is now working and have made this a high priority. I'd like to see our bills passed, my bills passed. The one with Senator Langford and Senator Blunt has been so helpful. We have a new version coming out, and we just ask you to work with us. I would love to have it get passed in the lame duck. For people that want to delay it or stall it beyond that, well, that's up to you, because then we'll have a new Congress. And I think it would be better to get it done as soon as possible, and we are certainly ready to go with that. And we've simply have to call the markup, which the chairman can do, and because we've already had a hearing on it, and then it could go to the floor. We have a similar bill in the House, and I think that would be good if we could possibly get it done by the end of the year, working with the administration. And then the last thing is, I think we will need more resources going forward. And I think getting the bill passed would be really helpful as a precursor to then getting more resources that you need as we go into the 2020 election. Obviously, 2018 is going to inform us as we go into the 2020 election. So mostly, I want to thank you for your work. I would be remiss not to mention that Minnesota had the highest voter turnout in the last election. Thank you, yes. And a lot of that has to do, I think it's like 3/4 of our eligible, not voters, but citizens actually vote. It's an incredible thing. And a lot of it has to do with that we have same-day registration. And then we also, just like many of your states, of course, have been using early voting more, but it's not the only way, because we also have the same-day registration. And I've seen that the states that move to that, whether they are more red states like Iowa or some of our other states that are more purple states, tend to have higher voter turnout. And I hope we can keep working with you on those kinds of measures to increase voter turnout, because I think it's really important. And I know the other side of this, because I used to be the county attorney for 8 years, and we got those election cases that would come in our door all the time. And we brought a few cases against people that had double voted. And I'll end with one amusing election story. We once had a couple that double voted because there was a school board race, and they double voted because they decided the school board line ran through their house. And they decided that that would be fair then, that they would vote in both areas. And they unfortunately also voted for the state races twice, right? So it comes to our attention, and we bring this up. And so then they call our prosecutor and said, well, where are we supposed to vote after we had resolved this thing? Where are we supposed to vote? And so we looked at it, and we called them back and said, well, in the future, because I think they were banned for voting, you have to vote where you sleep. And then the next day, the woman called back again and said, well, what if we slept in separate rooms? And so we each voted in a separate thing. And we said, we do not want to that is called TMI, and we don't want to know that. So I am aware of all the hard issues you deal with every single day, and I just want to thank you very much for your work. Thank you.
I want to thank both the senators for taking time out of their busy day to be a part of this. With that, one piece of caveat is that those born in the year 2000, when most of this started happening, are now eligible to vote in 2018 because they're now 18 years old. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Vice Chair Chrissy McCormick for her panel.